Thank you, Marla, and welcome everybody. Today is a nitty-gritty day with our webinar. We're really going to get down and show you about how to do everything with data. The topic is a little bit of a joke, but what we're really talking about is manipulating Donman beyond the level that a normal user would do. We're going to talk about importing data, which is probably fairly basic, although it's one of the most useful things you can do in Donman, how to import, dedupe, bring other information into Donman. And we're going to show you how to manipulate and change data. Since everything from I've decided the name of a campaign is wrong and I want to change it, or a series of campaigns, or I've decided that my donor types are wrong, or I want to consolidate my donor types. We'll be taking you right through. There are so many programs like that in Donman, so we won't be going through every single one, but I think what we'll give you today is enough of a grounding in those change programs that once you've seen what we've shown you today, you'll easily be able to translate those skills to the other change programs. Now, to finish up with today, I'll be showing you a mass update program which really does what the webinar ad says. You could change everybody's surname to Smith. For that reason, that particular program is not on the menu. It's a program that usually we only use by direction from us if there's a particular need for using it. But I'll take you through because it just shows you the most powerful program there is, but also the one with most risk. So today we're going to just cover in the webinar, but we'll be relating this to other programs in the system. The general import program, which is for importing any data you have from a text file, either tab delimited or comma delimited. Importing and updating existing records as against creating new ones. Bulk code changes, bulk campaign changes, bulk node imports, and the last one is that mass up program which changes almost anything. To start off today, Gary will cover the import programs and the bulk code. I'll come back and show you how to do bulk campaign changes. Gary will go back to bulk node, and then I'll do the mass update at the end. So I'll pass it over to Gary now to start with the import programs. Thanks, Gary.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Share my screen. Okay, so one of the most common areas that we certainly get questions about is people will ask us, I've got an Excel file of names and addresses, etc., that I want to put into my Donman system, and how do I do it? So that's the first thing that we're going to look at this morning. So at the moment, I've just got a sample file in here, and at the moment you can see it is an Excel file. While it's in Excel itself, I can't import it into the system because each of the cells in Excel will have formatting about what sort of cell it is. It might have colors and might have all sorts of things. So normally what we would do is save the Excel file as a tab delimited text file, so I get back to just raw data. So from what I've got on the screen, if I go into File, Save As, okay. So then you'd go into, normally it would go into your Donman DM work directory. In this case, because I'm using my test system and the training data, I'm going into DM train. By default, it's put the name down here already, but I have to click on the drop-down button here, and you'll see one of the options in Excel is text tab delimited. You can also use comma delimited, but normally we find that it's very normal that people will have commas in the data, and sometimes that can throw everything out. Like you might have something like flat 1, comma, and then the street address or something else. So tab is normally a much cleaner format to be able to pull that data in. So in this case, I'm changing it to import test.txt file and then save. If there's a file there of the same name already, I can say yes, just overwrite that file. Okay, Excel will complain that I'm saving it as a tab delimited file, which means it can't have multiple sheets or anything like that. So again, just say yes. And now up the top, it'll show that it's basically a text file now. It's not an Excel file. Okay. So if I close my Excel file now, don't need to save it because I've already saved it. In Donman, in order to get to the general import program, I need to go through the main menu. It will have your organization name on the first menu, then fundraising, and I need to go in through the modify history archive menu. Okay. In this case, when I click on it, I've got access level set up, but normally the system will ask you for a password to get into that menu. And I think just about everyone who uses Donman will know what that password is. It's certainly been around a long time. When I'm on that menu, on the right-hand side, you'll see the General Import Program. So this is the program that we're going to look at. And the two things we do with this is we import data from scratch, or we might export data out of Donman, do some manipulation, and we can update records. Or we might get data from somewhere else that has been washed against, a change of address database or phone number check or something like that, that I basically just want to update existing records. So for the first run, we're just going to go through and import a text file. Okay. So when I run in the program itself, my very first option says, do I want to add or update records? So in this case, we're adding new records. Then if I've got the prospect data file, which not everybody has, the system will allow me to choose the donor file or the prospect file to actually add the data into. In this case, I'm not using the prospects. I'm going straight into the data file, the donor data file, sorry. From there, I'm saying, is the file comma or tab delimited? So this is where you've got the choice based on how you've actually got the file or how you've saved it. In this case, I did save it as a tab delimited. The first row in my Excel sheet had the field names, so I'd say yes, skip that because I don't want to create a record that's just got the field names in. Anything we do in bulk in Donman, you'll have this question here that says, have we done a recent backup? Because potentially I could be importing thousands of records, and if I've done something wrong, I want to be able to easily recover from that. So normally on your network, the system will be backed up itself as part of the server backup every night, but sometimes you might want to just back up the data yourself, and you can do that by fairly much just zipping up the data folder in your DM work. That will give you an instant backup of the data as that is. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to say, yes, I have done a backup. The system by default will put today's date as the acquisition date for these records. But if I wanted to, say, look, these records came in last week or something, I can certainly change the date here. From there, because I've said add records, the system now saying what donor types are they. In this case, they're all individuals. If I had a spreadsheet that had a mixture of organization names and individual names, I'd normally split them into two different files and do two different imports. And that's primarily so that my sort keys and the ways that duplicates are found and everything like that are generated based on the company name, not the individual's name. From there, I then choose what my source code is going to be for these records. Okay, so normally I'd say, in this case, I've got my external list, which is my test source code. So whenever I'm creating a new list of people, I want to identify where they come from. So normally I would go into housekeeping first, down to descriptive codes, and create a source code to suit what's coming in for these people. Exactly the same if I had an extra code that I wanted to attach them, create all the codes first so that when you come in to do the import, everything's basically waiting for us just to choose. So in this case, I'm going to choose my external list. Okay. I'm not using an extra code for these people, and I then want to do the main code. In this case, is going to be all male. Okay. From there, the system will say, where is the text file that you want to import? So if you just click on the button, it will take you by default into your DM work directory or whatever your normal working directory is. If I sort them by date, because I know that I recently updated the file, it'll be at the top of my file. So I can say, yes, that's what I'm looking for. The system will automatically create this field assignment file, which will make more sense when we get to the next screen, which means if my field names in the Excel sheet don't exactly line up with Donman, I can basically marry up the field so that the data goes into the right field. Okay. If it's in uppercase, I could say yes. Normally it's easier to fix that in Excel than it is to try and do it later. If I was doing something that I thought, look, I'm not quite sure about this data and I just want to go through the steps but then not actually import it, you can at this point here say, yes, I want to do a trial run. So in this case, I'm saying, no, I'm not. I'm going to do a live run. From there, the system will take me down and say, do you want to decide by dupes by email? And normally similar name and postcode. So normally I'd say yes to both of those to maximize the potential for capturing duplicates, because the last thing I want to do is read in a whole lot of records just to create duplicates in my system. Okay. Because in this case here I said I'm adding records, and the system is now saying if I find a duplicate record, do I want to update them from the file that I'm importing or skip them? So in this this case I'm going to say update, but you can certainly say if they're already in my file I want to skip them, unless you knew, of course, the data that you're importing is much cleaner or has been washed somehow, and if we find the existing person, I want to update that record with any changes. Okay. From there, enter to continue, and on the next screen you can see this is where the fields start to line up. So I can see that title has automatically aligned with title in the data file, but name 1 is saying not read. So what I need to do is click on the button at the side of that, choose my file and say, well, name 1 is going to go into first name, last name going into surname. Okay, so you can see that even if the field's not exactly the same header or the same description, I can certainly choose the fields in Donman that I want that bit of data to go into. Okay, so now I've got address 1 going into street 1, address 2, suburb states have matched up straight away, but P code isn't. So this is the next one. Okay, so then I choose postcode. Okay, so now all of the fields that have come from the text file, which are on the right-hand side here, are now being aligned to a field in Donman. Okay, so if I enter through, so you can have data up to 33 fields that you might have, which is far and away plenty enough fields for basic contact information. So this program is not designed to read in, donations or pledges or any of those things. It really is names and addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, that sort of thing. Okay. So once I get to the last field and enter the system, say, are we ready to begin? Say yes, and it will now go through the import. If it finds somebody of a similar name, so here I've Priscilla in Lane Cove 2066, and I've got someone else here, but it's a different person. Okay? So if I just click on cancel or escape, will then take me through and create a new record for that. In this case, I'm saying, oh, look, I've got somebody who's already on the system. And I'd say, well, that is the same person. If I double-click, so yes, confirm that it's the donor. Okay, so the system will go through basically and just do the duplicate check as I import all the records. So if it is the same person, in this case, I can see I've got people that have got similar sounding names that are both in the same suburb, but it's not the same person. So again, just click cancel. Okay, again, I've got the same person. Okay, so for each record that you read in, this system will do this duplicate check so that we can minimize what's going on. At the end of the import, you'll get the preview here of the file where it's showing me that this donor here had possible duplicates for another donor on the system, and the same here for Derek and Daffy. Okay, so there's similarities in the names, but it is not the same person. So even if I had said don't check for duplicates, the system will still show me this on the log file. Okay, once I said okay, in this case I'm very happy with that. I can close that, and then you'll get the actual log of everything that's happened. So it's saying it's created, new donors of these numbers and who it was. If I've selected a match here, it's telling me that, record 21 in my Excel spreadsheet, I've chosen that as the donor match. Yeah. So if there's anything on there, because you can quickly scroll down and have a look at it, if there's anything on there that you said, oh, hang on, I need to do something with that, you can certainly print these out, but most of them are for informational purposes. So you can look at it and go, okay, yes, there's something I need to address, or no, there's not. Okay. So once I've done that, I finish my import. If I then go back to my start menu and into donor entry and page up, I can see these are the files that I've just created. Yeah, so I can see on the right-hand side here, they've got today as the acquisition date. They were last changed by me because I've created them, and they came from my external list. Okay, so as you go through all of the records. One of the common things we find, though, is when people read in, especially phone numbers, sometimes they're not formatted very nice in the Excel sheet, or it's just a number. So as you can see here in the case of the mobile number, it's not in the format that I'd like, and my 0 at the beginning has disappeared. Okay, this would be exactly the same if I had the phone number for home, where I didn't have spaces in it, because that's exactly what Excel does. It treats everything as a number. Okay, so that you can see on the next record I've got the same sort of thing. So this is where I could use the import program to do an update of the data. So what I would do is say, okay, look, I want to basically export the data, and all I really need is the donor number to match the record when it comes back in, and the phone number field. So in this case, I've already created that file, but normally you would go through, do your selection file, export the data, put it into Excel, and get rid of all the columns that you don't need, because you don't need to update names and addresses and things like that. It's really just the fields here that I do want to update, because I certainly don't want to go through every record and have to manually click in the field and update the fields. So I put the 0 in front of there, put the 4 and 4, and the same with the mobile number, because it's much easier to do that sort of thing in Excel. So if I escape out of my donors now, okay, I need to go back to Excel. If I ever was being clever. Okay, so in this case, I've now got a file in Excel where I've basically got nothing but the donor number, as I said, because I need that to match it when I go back into the donor file, and I've got the phone number field that I need to do something with. Okay, mobiles is the easiest field of all to manipulate because they're all the same. We don't have to worry about having an 02, 03, any of the prefixes in front of the phone number depending on the state. And if I did have a lot of these and I had records that did have the prefix on there, and I wanted to make sure that was all the same, I'd also export the state field to give you some concept of where that should be. That will never be 100% correct because sometimes people live on the border of states, and it depends which telephone exchange you're actually attached to. They might be, they might live in Tweed Heads or something, and they might be attached to a telephone exchange in Queensland, so their number will still start with 07 or vice versa. So in this case, I'll show you a very easy way to sort of manipulate the data to get the phone numbers back into the field that I want, and then we'll go and import and update the records. So in the case here of my mobile numbers, if I highlight the column or just the numbers and then right-click, you can go down to Format Cells. And in this case, it's not going to be one of my standard formats, so it's not currency or number or date or any of those things. So I need to go down to Custom, and where it's got General here, the first thing I want to do is put the 0 back in front of my number. So if I put that in, and in Excel, if you use the hash, is basically the numbers. And you can see in the preview just above that that's changing the format of how that field's going to look when it's finished. Okay, so that's exactly what I want it to do. So once I've done that, I can say OK. And now I've got the phone numbers into the format that I want for the mobile. Okay. Exactly the same thing will happen in this case, in the case of the phone home. If I right-click again, go to Format Cells, again do another Custom. Okay. So in this case, the preview is showing me correct because the first number was correct. Okay. But what I still need to do is to make sure so the second one comes up, again, is put my 0, my first hash from my first number, which is the 2, space, 4 hashes, space, and 4 hashes again. Okay. Once I do that, I can now see that the second one has now got the spaces in it, and it's got the 0 at the front. Okay. So you will see that some are left justified, which means that Excel is seeing that as text, and the ones that are right justified is seeing as a number. Okay, but once I save this again as a text file, then Excel will store the numbers as I've changed them. If I go to save my file, say yes, I want to update it, Excel is going to have a complaint again when I try and save. Okay, so that's save. So now if I go back in, say, okay, now what I want to do is go back into my bulk utilities, back into my general import program. But in this case, I'm going to update records on updating records. Again, I'm saying I want to update the donor file. It is a tab delimited file. Again, skip the first row because it's got the field names in. And yes, I have done a backup. Okay, so you can see the difference between this one and the previous run for adding records. It has now skipped this part of the screen about acquisition date, donor type, etc., because that's not relevant for updating data, only for adding new records. If I go in and look for my file again, I've got my import phone update. Go through. I don't need to worry about a test run. I don't need to worry about duplicate checking in this updating records. Enter to continue, and because the fields are in, they are exactly matched up. So you might have things like postcode that comes out as P code instead of phone, instead of postcode, etc. that you need to manipulate if you're doing names and addresses. But in this case, for phone numbers, it's going to match up directly. So if I just enter through, so yes, I do want to begin. Yeah, it's basically hasn't asked me any questions along the way because there was no duplicate checking or anything to do. It's telling me that it's read the 2 records. Okay, record was found and updated. If we now get back and have a look at the donor, I can now.
Got a little bit of interruption there, Gary. Is that at your end or?
No, that's Andrew.
Sorry, might have been me.
Can you mute yourself, please? Okay. From there, you can see on the donor record that I've now got the phone number in the format that I want, and I've got the mobile number. So that's really the 2 ways that I can use to, manipulate the data to either import brand new records, or later on, if I've got a whole lot of stuff I want to do some nicer formatting on, etc. I can certainly use Excel, manipulate the data, and use the import and update to sort of get that stuff back into play. Yeah. So hopefully that'll give everyone a bit of a guide of, using the import program or using it to manipulate the data to update things that are much easier to do in an Excel file than it is to do 1 record at a time, because there's no nice, easy way to do this sort of thing. But certainly phone numbers is a very common field that I certainly come across going from organisation to organisation, that people don't have that nice formatting. Okay. So the next thing we're going to look at is, while I'm here, is when I put in a donor and I've gone through my records, and as I start getting them, I'm getting a whole lot of codes that have been created. Some of them have been there for years, etc. So I might say, look, I've got some codes in here that I want to either manipulate to change or get rid of. Yeah, so in this case, I've got, on some of the records, you can see I've got a code called test2. Okay. Or if I've got a code that for some reason has been deleted from the system but it's still on the donor record, I'll get this sort of error here. Okay. If I bring up my list of codes, it's saying, well, there is no code called ADVR in the system. This, again, is something fairly common where people assume that if I go into housekeeping and go to descriptive codes and delete the code, it is somehow magically going to go through the whole database and remove that code from each record. This, of course, has not happened, because if someone had made a mistake and deleted the code and it went through the whole database and removed it, I'd have no way of putting that back, because I wouldn't have a selection of people that it changed or anything like that. The steps we're going to look at now is what I would normally do to either clean up codes or do something like that. So in this case, where I've got this code and I said, well, I either need to recreate the code or I need to get rid of it. If I want to get rid of it or recreate it, I still need to go into housekeeping, put this code back in to the system. So if I copy that, so that I can then say, let's find any donor who's got that extra code and let's change it to blank. So we basically get rid of that code from the donor records or the archive records or prospects if I've got the whole 3 data files. Once I've done that, I can certainly go into the coded list and delete it from there. But I need to make sure that the data is nice and sorted before I just delete the code from the list. So if that's something that you've got, the next steps that we'll look at will certainly show you how to solve that sort of problem. So from that, I need to go back into housekeeping. On the left-hand side, we've got donor descriptive codes. And you'll see here's all of my different code sets. So in this case, the code we were looking at was extra codes. Okay. And it doesn't matter what I put in this case for the description, because I just need to get rid of this code, because some of the codes are very ambiguous and you won't know what they actually mean, because people have just put the code in and the code itself isn't explanatory enough, to tell me what it was actually for. So if I just enter through, have a look at my list, I've now got that code there, so I can go through the bulk code change process and now say, I want to find everyone who's got that code, and I can change it to a new code, or I can change it to blank to basically get rid of it. again, if I go through the system into my Modify History Archive menu, on the left-hand side, you'll see Bulk Utility Programs. So this is the menu where it's going to ask me a password, which if anyone doesn't know the password, certainly, log a support job or ask, because I'm sure everyone who's used Donman for any period of time will know what these are, because sometimes we have to go into these menus to do certain things. From there, you can see here's a whole lot of programs about doing bulk updates. Okay, so my most common one is bulk donors code update, but you can see I can also do the same thing for archives or prospects. So in this case, we're going to look at donors because the process is exactly the same. It's just using different data files. So if I go into bulk donors code update, again, I'm doing a bulk change to the system. Will say, have we done a backup? So I'm going to say, yes, I have done a backup. The two ways I can use the code change program is if I had a selection of people and said, for this list of people, I want to change their code from this to that, or I want to change it from this to blank, I can certainly just click on the list and choose an existing selection file of people to only change those records. In this case, I'm going to make them all global change, so I don't need to use a selection file. Okay. From there, the system will then say, which code is it that I want to change? So again, if we bring up the list, and in this particular instance, I'm saying I'm going to extra codes. Yeah, so if I go to extra codes and say, yes, I want to continue, I've got two options now. If I was amalgamating a number of codes, I would choose option 1. If I'm just changing one code to another, I can choose option 2. I'll run it through on this first run as option 2, and then I'll do another one using option 1, so you can certainly see the difference how that comes up. So if I choose option 2, you can see I've now got 17 different lines here with a dotted line between them, which means when I choose the code on the left-hand side, I can say I want to change anyone from that code to no code. Okay? And in this case, it's the only change I want to make. So if I enter, it'll skip the rest of the screen and then say, do you want to continue? So if I say yes, it's saying out of my whole data file, which is very big in this case, but it's found that one record, and it has now changed that code from. Okay, so I'll get a printout of that. Yes. Okay, which will basically show the date, when I started, and then I'm doing the bulk donor code change, and I changed from this to this code here. Okay, so anytime you do a bulk change, this will normally spit out the printer automatically. In this case, I've got my default printer set as a PDF, so I don't, have to necessarily print these things out. Okay. So in that case, I basically went through and changed it. So anyone who had ADVR has now got nothing in there. If I said, look, I want to make sure that I've got exactly the thing on my archives, I could do bulk archive code change or code update, and you can see it's exactly the same, except it will be using a selection file of archives, which will have an extension of XPL rather than APL for donors, but the process is exactly the same from there. Okay. So in this case, because on some of my data I've got the test extra codes, and I want to do an amalgamation, and so look, I want to find anyone who's got this code and this code, and I want to change them all to test 3. So I'm going to find anyone who's got test 1 and test 2, and I'm going to change everyone to be test 3. So slightly different from the previous run, but not that much. So again, if I choose yes, again, in this case, I don't have a selection of people. Again, I'm choosing my extra codes. So yes, I want to continue. And again, I'm getting the screen where I've got option 1 or 2. Where we did the previous run and I said option 2, I'm now going to choose option 1. And you can see the difference on the screen. There is only one dotted line going across. So what this means in this case is that I can choose multiple codes on the left-hand side and say I want all of those codes to go to one on the right-hand side. Okay, so even if I was manipulating and said, look, I've got a dozen codes, half a dozen codes, whatever, that I just said, look, I want to get rid of them or I want to amalgamate them into one code, this is the option that I'd use, because I could choose the multiple on the left-hand side, the one I want them to have on the right-hand side, even if I was blanking them, I could just enter and say change everyone from test 1 to test 2 to nothing. Okay, so if I choose test 3 and then say yes. Okay, so in this case it's saying it found 42 donor records that had either test 1 or test 2 on them. Cancel my printout. And it has made those changes. If we go back and look at our donor entry, okay, so as I go through now, I see I've got a few records that have got test 3 on them, okay, but nobody's got test 1 or test 2. So you can use that same program with you using donor types, because sometimes people create donor types where they might have an I for individual or a B for business or C for company. And ideally, if you've got 8 characters in the code, use as many as you can, so that when you look at a record, it certainly gives you, a much better idea of what sort of record it is, rather than the code. In days gone by, that was a bit of a pain, because when I put in the code, I would have to type in all the characters. Whereas nowadays, as you can see, it's doing pretty typing. So as I start typing in I, it's showing me the first code is in div. Okay, so the same sort of thing if I was doing it as a B for business. So that'll just go through all the way. Yeah. So when you do the bulk change, you can change donor types, you can change the mail codes, the extra codes, the source codes, member codes, just about any code that's on the donor record, you can use the bulk code change to do. And if I was doing a global change and cleanup, I would certainly go through and say, look, I want to find everyone in donors and change these codes, and do exactly the same thing in archives, so that when you move data from archives back to donors, you don't have a whole lot of cleaning up to do. Okay. So hopefully that gives everyone a bit of an idea on using the bulk code change program, as well as the general import to either add new records or update existing records. And most of it is fairly straightforward, but like most things, just be careful with what you're doing, especially when you're doing things in bulk. Okay, so I'll leave you right at the moment and hand back to Andrew, and he'll run through doing bulk campaign changes for you. I hope he will anyway.
Andrew, we might just need you to unmute yourself.
We try hard, folks.
He's still muted, so we'll just see if we can fix that for him.
I'm sorry I had my microphone off. Thank you, Gary. The program I'm going to show you has many of the same features as the one Gary's just shown you with the bulk code, but it's for campaigns, and it allows you to do at the same time one-to-one or many-to-one changes. So it's on the bulk utility menu, just as Gary's shown you with the bulk code, only it's down here, it's called bulk. I've lost it. Bulk campaign change, here we go. So the bulk campaign change, again, as Gary said, we always ask you, have you done a backup, so that you can't blame us when things go wrong. So you say yes to that if you've done it. If you haven't done it, as Gary suggested, a good idea is zip up your data directory or copy it somewhere to make sure you've got another copy. Now, the bulk campaign has a lot of extra features. I won't take you through all of them, but I'll explain them. Basically, it allows you to change the name of a set of campaigns to another set of campaigns. It may be that you run several campaigns that are sub-campaigns, and now you've decided they were 4 years ago and you'd just as soon have them down as one campaign. Now, there is also a facility where you've made a mistake. You've realised that over a period of time you put donations to one campaign and then you put it to another, and really they should have been two campaigns. You may have, for example, just bled one annual appeal into the other. So there is this option here that you can just do this for a date range. So if I do a date range here, only donations within that date range will have the campaign updated. Now this program, it's not just going to update the campaign record. This one will do the campaign, the donation, if the pledge won, the pledge, the donor summary history, functions. In other words, anywhere where the campaign is used, it will update and change and consolidate. So I can do it for a date range, or I don't have to. And if I do it for a date range, I can also do it for a batch number if I was doing just particular campaigns for a batch. But anyway, I'm just going to look at the basic campaign change and edit campaigns to be changed. Yes, we'd always need to do that. Now, remember on the bulk code campaign Gary showed you, it asks you whether you're going to merge one campaign or change campaigns. Now, the bulk campaign enables you to do this in 3 sections. So I could have a section where I'm merging multiples to one campaign, a section where I'm just changing one to another, and a third section doing either one too. So there's a lot of options here for doing it. So I'm just going to do a very simple one to show you how it works. I'm just going to do a change campaign. I'm going to pick a campaign that I've got in here called CACQ, Company Computer Acquisition. And if I press enter, it then says, what will I want to change this to? So I'm going to choose something else. We'll make this foo. And I could now do another campaign to another to another. Now, if I say no to that, in other words, I just want to simply change CACQ to foo, it takes me to the second column. Now, in the second column, I can do 3 things. I can say merge to one campaign, which is taking several campaigns and make them one, or change campaigns, or I can just press enter. If I press enter, it'll jump me to the next screen. I press enter again. So what I'm saying is, look, all I really want to do is that one simple change. So then, do I want to continue? Now, there is also the option of a filter. If I click on the filter button, I can choose some other things. I can say, well, I only want to do this campaign change if the ledger code of the donation is a certain thing, or it's a raffle one, or it's something else. So there are many options that you can do here. But I'll continue on and just do that simple one, and you can just see what it's doing on the screen. It's giving me a summary as it goes, how many donations it's read, how many reversals, pledges, donors, and as each one is read, it updates the total. So 429 donations have been updated, 93 donors, 15 campaign cost records, total of 545 records. The report is finished. It will, in fact, give you a printout of the results. And here it is, that printout, the donations, and what I chose. So I chose CACQ to foo. So that is how you can change your campaigns in bulk. Many reasons you might want to do that, many options in there. So I'll hand it back to Gary now, and he'll do the bulk notes edition.
Thank you, Andrew. Then just to say, and add to what Andrew was doing, once you've moved all the money out of one campaign, or all the donations from one campaign to another, you'll then have, for all purposes, an empty campaign which you may never want to use. And if you go through Modify History Archive and then Modify Campaign File, you'll be able to find the file, and just like you can do on Modify History Archive Donors, you can press Shift F6 and delete that old campaign file. So it's no good having it sitting there if you're never going to use that again. Okay. So what we're going to look at now is adding notes to donors in bulk. There's 2 particular programs we can use this, and we'll have a look at both of them very quickly. So again, I'm in Modify History Archive and Bulk Utility Programs. Okay. From there, as I go through, I can see that I've got a program called Bulk Add Notes, and I've also got one that is Bulk Import Notes from Text File. Depending on everyone's particular menu, not everyone might have both of these options, but I do believe everyone will have this very first one. The difference between the two, so go through, is the Bulk Add Notes basically says that for a selection of people, I can choose the notepad and I'm giving everyone the same note. So if I said again, yes, I've got this, I've got a selection of people. So I go through and say, okay, I'm looking for whatever it might be. If I find something a little bit more recent, I'll probably actually get something to happen. Okay, so I've got my test 2 file there. The system is going to count, so there's 38 records, and I'm going to add this note to. Okay, from there, because you've got 4 notepads in the system, and each one can be renamed by yourself, the names that you have here will be reflective on what your notepads are called. So in this case, I'm going to put them just into the general notes. Okay, so I just put in what text I want everyone to have, and I've got an option to add them to the beginning of the notepad. If I say yes, and yes, I want to continue. Okay, so the system's saying it's updated 38 people. And again, like all the bulk programs, I'll get that printout showing basically what the system has done. So that one is basically for adding the same note to everybody. And if I go back to donor notes, I'll see that that note is there. Okay. The other one, which is for all purposes a little bit more flexible, is sometimes I'll have a list where at least I've got the donor numbers and I've got an individual note that I want to import to each person's record. So that's where the 2 programs differ quite significantly. So if I go into the bulk import notes from text, okay, so you can see that this one is asking me, again, have I done a backup? But it's asking me, where is the text file that I want to import? So again, even if I had the file in Excel, I'd have to do like we did previously with the general import, to save it to a text file so that I can use that to import. Okay, so from there I've got my import notes text file that I've set up earlier. Okay, so does the first line contain just headings? So again, if I had the number as my heading and note, then I'd say yes, because I don't want to import that to anyone's record. Again, I get the option to say which of the notepads I want to import that note to. Okay, insert them at the beginning, and again, do I want to begin? Okay, so this is more flexible when you might have had an event or something like that where you've got a spreadsheet that's got the donors' names and it's got their donor numbers and things like that. And really, I've put some comments in there. You know, people might have a comment about the event or something that I want to add to their notes later. And from that, I can strip out everything except the donor number and the actual comment, and then import it to the person's notes. So then if I say, yes, I want to begin, in this case, there was only 2 people, so it was a very quick read through. Okay, so if I've actually saw me to the F1, and I was saying, in this case, I visited, you know, that person visited for the tour, you can see the note has been absolutely added there from the text file. If I go to, all right, okay, and in this case, I've put a, you know, another comment saying they informed us of a new phone number. So whatever was in the text file, the system is matched by the donor number and the text that I wanted to import. For all of the other records, as we went through, I find one of my people that were actually in my selection file. Okay, so I would have, whatever I've, you know, put into the bulk note where everyone got the same, say in this case where everyone was sent the annual report 2001, that would have gone in there automatically as they go through. Okay, so that's the 2 programs that you can use to basically update the notes for donors. There's that. So you can either do it from an external text file or just use the selection file and give absolutely every donor the same note, and that'll go through and put it onto the notepad that you've specified. Now I'll hand back to Andrew now, and he's going to run through the mass update program, which, as he said before, will allow us to change almost anything to anything, but it is very dangerous. Okay, bye now.
Okay, this program definitely is one that you would only do on our recommendation because it really will change anything. We also, I know we're really running out of time and I want to make sure I have questions, so I'll just do a quick view of this so that you'll know that it exists. If you need it at some point, you can contact us. So I'm just running this. It's not on the menu, but basically you'll see there's lots of warning and help screens. The first thing says if you're on a backup, and that is so important for this one. Enter file to update. This is not just the donor file. This will let you pick any file in the system. So for example, I'm going to pick the donation file, and I can have a selection file, and then it says, what do I want to update? Now, the difference between this program and the bulk code and the bulk campaign is there are no checks. So, for example, if I say I want to change the campaign code or the chart account code, the system doesn't know what I'm doing. This is a generic program. It won't make sure the chart account code is one of our real codes. So you have to be very careful what you're doing. So I'm going to choose pay method, and this is, I would not recommend you doing this. And I'm going to continue. There is a filter button as well, so you can limit what you're doing. So change one thing to another, or unconditional change any item. So if I was going to unconditionally change any item, I could change every single donation on file to pay method of postal. Now, that would be very silly of me. Using the filter, I might be able to pick a date range and say the ones that were put through as postal were put through as a mistake, and I'm going to update it. So I'm going to change one thing to another, not unconditionally changed, and I'm going to say everything that has postal, change it to M-card. Now, this will do nothing, because I think what you'll have all noticed is I've written postal in lowercase, because this is very accurate, it's very specific. If I had written postal in uppercase, it would work. Because I've done it in lowercase, it won't, because I don't actually want to make this silly change. This program hasn't done any changes because of that, but I could. And this is a program where I really could change everybody's surname to Smith. There are many cases where this can be very useful, and if there are particular reasons you need to make some sort of absolute change to records in that way, please contact support. We will help you run through this program. We don't put it on the menu because of the dangers that can happen. Okay, we've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to stop now and give you time for questions.
Okay, thanks, Andrew and Gary. There's a few questions already posted, so we'll run through them first. But if you, as we mentioned earlier, if you do have any questions, please post them in the question box on that control panel, and we'll get through as many as we can. And any we can't follow up today, we'll certainly follow up with you offline afterwards. Okay, so starting back at the top of the session, there was a question from Anthea, and I think this was for Andrew. Doing the trial run in the general lens, oh, this is actually more of a comment than a question, but she said doing the trial run in the general import program is also a good way of checking if any of the new records are already on Donman. I think that was actually through Gary's section.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's a really good reason to do the trial run, because you can actually see in case you're actually reading the same file twice.
Anthea did also have a question on, is there a way to update the involvement codes in bulk?
I
think
not sure about that
one.
Coming soon to the next update. I thought we'd covered virtually everything that we could possibly bulk update, but no, I don't think there's a bulk involved, but there will be.
And thank you, Anthea, for your first tip. A few responses saying thank you for that. So, okay, a question from Rachel. What would be the reversals as part of the campaign change? Why would there be reversals as part of a campaign change?
Because there may be reverse. Sorry, Andrew, you can go.
I was just going to say that, remember, when we're reversing a campaign, the campaign code is in the donation file, but it may also be in a reversal file. In other words, if you've reversed a donation out of the donation file and it's now in the reversal file, it's still got that same campaign code. So when we go through an update, we look at every donation, change that, and if a change is made, we do the corresponding changes to donors and to pledges and things like that. But we also look at the reversal file in case those campaign codes are there and make the same change.
Okay, the next question, sorry, I've just lost my place, from Colleen. Read the bulk notes update. She's saying last time she used this program, it added the notes but did not include the date of the update or the person who made the update. Does it now add that additional information automatically, or does she have to include that in the note for importing?
Yeah, no, I just had a look at that myself after I did it, and no, it doesn't. But we'll get that changed before the next update, so that it does just like if you were adding the note manually.
Okay, and I'm not sure if this is along the same lines. Anthea says, how can we have the import bulk notes from text?
If it's not on your menu, just log a support job, and myself or somebody else will ask you to send your menu across, and we'll be able to modify that and send it back to you.
Okay, and Rachel's also asking, can the insert date tool be used as part of the bulk note import?
Yeah, which is similar to Colleen's question. Yep. Our best thing will be, yes, we need to modify that program so it does it automatically.
Well, I think we need to modify the program to give you the option.
Yeah.
I mean, because it may be that if you're adding 4 different note lines, you don't want to, you know, for some reason, you don't want the date on each one. So I think we should just have that as an option to insert the date at the start.
Rachel says yes, she agrees. Thank you.
That's a work in progress then.
Okay. Well, that looks like all the questions we've got so far. I'll just give people a couple more seconds to post any more, and I'll give you the plug for the next webcast, which is scheduled for Wednesday the 11th of December at 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And so details of that will be in your newsletter and inbox shortly, so look out for that. And also find recordings of our webcasts at our website, donman.net.au, and it's under the What's New section of the website. So the last month's webcast is up there if you missed it. And that's about all. I think there's, somebody's just asking quickly a couple of last questions, Gary and Andrew. Firstly, thank you for a great webinar, so that's great to hear. Anthony's just asking, changing the text file to a selection file. I'm not quite sure what her question means. I might take that one offline, sorry. Melinda's asking, when is the next update?
Probably next month, because there's quite a few changes.
We're just in the process of tidying up the graphs that are the good new graphs that are going into the dashboard. As soon as we've got that done, we're really close with that, we'll probably always an update, but yes, probably next month.
Okay, sorry. Okay, and what I guess a comment from Liz is she recently attempted the bulk add notes and it didn't include different line changes. It was all continued text.
I think the bulk add notes is just allowing you to add one note at a time. I don't think it does multiple lines.
Okay. Alrighty, and my apologies if I've missed any questions there, because we kind of had a flurry of them, but I think I've got through most of them. If we did miss any, we'll certainly follow up with you offline. So we might leave it at that today. Thank you, Gary and Andrew, for today's webcast. Great topic. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And if you do have any further questions, please contact us on our email address, which is info_donman@advsol.com, or, of course, give us a call. So that concludes our webcast for today. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.